Microdosing in general is something that can help a lot of people dealing with addiction and dealing with recovery. So it is an interesting area because I know that a lot of people in the 12-step programs have a really hard time with the concept that mushrooms are a drug or an illegal drug. And what I like to say is something that Dr. Fadiman says often, which is mushrooms don't know they're illegal, right? And the oldest fossil we know of is a mushroom. It's 800 million years old. So the idea is that plants and animals are derived from mushrooms. So this whole concept that mushrooms are an illegal drug is really the biggest hangup with people in recovery. And if we can re-educate them that mushrooms is not an illegal drug, maybe it was made illegal in 72 by Nixon, but again, this is a tool. This is a substance that can benefit millions of people. What we have to do is skillfully break down the barriers and any myths that might be there.
I'm Mike Govoni, and for the last 15 years, I've been in recovery from addiction and on the deepest quest to find healing, to experience my own unique wholeness beyond the story of what happened to me. By taking an integrative, holistic approach to experience transformation, I bring you the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast, a show dedicated to people in recovery who are looking for deeper healing and transformation. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Healing Beyond Recovery podcast. If this is your first episode, welcome. And if you've listened before, welcome back. I'm super excited to bring you today's episode with the founder of Flow State Micro, Adam Bramlage. Today's topic may be a bit controversial for people who are in recovery from substance abuse, and I encourage you to listen with an open heart and open mind. I was quite apprehensive to do an episode on the topic of microdosing psychedelics until quite a few people in the recovery space, including some of my coaching clients, were reaching out and wanting to explore and learn more about the topic. Many of which who were feeling confused about exploring with a mind-altering substance and not knowing which course to take. Once again, I always say it's about intention. And when we have a deep intention to heal rather than escape, then these powerful plants and fungi can shift our consciousness for us to see ourselves and see our lives in a new, profound way. I first met Adam as a participant and now graduate of the Salt City Psychedelic Therapy Program. Adam presented on one of the modules on the topic of microdosing, as well as he shared his amazing work he does in this space. And after keeping in touch and going back and forth for about 4 months, we're finally bringing this episode to you today. A few takeaways you will leave from by listening to this episode: what exactly a microdose is and what it is not, some of the most common reasons why people start microdosing and what it may help with. We explore the different microdosing protocols which have been created from pioneers in this field, such as Dr. James Fadiman and Paul Stamets. We talk about some things you may want to look out for before microdosing, like contraindications. We explore the topic of microdosing to treat addiction. And last but not least, Adam shares his personal story of healing from treatment-resistant depression with microdosing psilocybin. Adam Bramlage is the founder and CEO of Flow State Micro, where he works one-on-one with clients to optimize their microdosing experience. He is co-founder of the Microdosing Movement, a 6-week online microdosing course, and a co-founder of the Microdosing Support Network, the first free online microdosing support group, both in partnership with the San Francisco Psychedelics Society and the Microdosing Institute in Holland. So, without further ado, Adam, welcome to the show.
I think that this is microdosing in general is something that can help a lot of people dealing with addiction and dealing with recovery. So it is an interesting area because I know that a lot of people in the 12-step programs have a really hard time with the concept that mushrooms are a drug or an illegal drug. And what I like to say is something that Dr. Fadiman says often, which is mushrooms don't know they're illegal, right? And the oldest fossil we know of is a mushroom. It's 800 million years old. So the idea is that plants and animals are derived from mushrooms. So this whole concept that mushrooms are an illegal drug is really the biggest hangup with people in recovery. And if we can re-educate them that mushrooms is not an illegal drug, maybe it was made illegal in 72 by Nixon, but again, this is a tool. This is a substance that can benefit millions of people. What we have to do is skillfully break down the barriers and any myths that might be there.
For sure, sure. So there's definitely a lot of propaganda that comes with this topic, and I think more than ever with the psychedelic research from MAPS and really what's coming on the horizon with the legalization and decriminalization of these substances is really shifting people's consciousness to open up and say, wow, maybe there's something here. There's research studies being done by, like I say, MAPS, and we're showing promising results of healing from PTSD, which is at the root of addiction, is trauma. So if we can integrate these, and these aren't even alternative therapies, as you know, we've been healing with plants and fungus since the beginning of time. So this is really like getting back to the root. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, so to speak, can you share with the audience your brief experience or a brief story about treating resistant depression with microdosing?
Absolutely. I would say that probably for 39 years until I started microdosing, I had a serious addiction to misery. Depression, I believe, probably runs in my family. I definitely dealt with a lot of depression. I had used cannabis my entire life. I spent more than a decade in the cannabis space here in California. And cannabis is great for palliative care, meaning for day-to-day care, sort of like a Band-Aid over the wound. But what I found 3 years ago when I began to work with small and large doses of psilocybin was that the psilocybin actually helped me dive into the wound and get proper healing so that I didn't need to have a Band-Aid. And so that's what I think is really, really amazing about the use of psilocybin in small doses is I was able to treat my treatment-resistant depression with subthreshold or small doses of psilocybin, which means they have no classic psychedelic effects. You're not tripping, you're not seeing things, the flowers are not talking to you. And that's what I think is so amazing for microdosing in something like addiction or recovery is, again, the person is not getting high. They're simply taking a very, very small amount of the dose that acts as an addiction disruptor, allows them, in my opinion, to rewire their mind to a more positive, healthy state, and then move forward in their life. So again, I used psilocybin to treat my own treatment-resistant depression. It was working so well for me that people around me, my friends and family, started coming to me and saying, "What's up with you? What are you doing differently? I want some of that." And I began to work individually with people I love, dear friends, my own parents. And from that, working as a coach, it's gone out like mycelium, and I keep getting, sent friends of friends and family members. And so that's kind of how my work in the microdosing space began.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. And I too have supported other people, friends and family, including my mother, with microdosing in conjunction with her ketamine therapy to treat PTSD. And mom is having, and I also got mom's permission to share this, mom is having an amazing positive effect from microdosing with conjunction with her ketamine. So I know this is for real, and I have personally used psilocybin in microdoses and in higher doses to experience, deeper healing and transformation. So I appreciate you for bringing your work into the forefront and sharing it like the web of mycelium. It's very important, and this is how people learn and grow. So question, can you just share briefly, because I know there's some listeners that just don't know what microdosing is. Can you just share what is microdosing?
Absolutely. So microdosing is taking 1/10 to 1/20th of a normal dose of a psychedelic or a substance, right? So, for example, what would be a great way to break this down? So it's subperceptual, meaning subperceptual meaning that you're not really feeling like you're tripping. Again, it's a dose that you can go about your normal day-to-day life. You can drive your car, you can be at work. So again, the big thing to remember is microdosing has no classic psychedelic effects, okay? This is about taking a very, very, very small amount of a mushroom or LSD. For example, with dried psilocybin, we're talking sometimes 50 milligrams. So again, we're taking a very, very small amount of a classic psychedelic substance and getting benefits from it. Now, a normal dose of psilocybin mushrooms would be 2.5 to 3.5 grams, okay, to give you an idea. 3.5 grams would be 3,500 milligrams. Okay. That's a full dose. A microdose, 50 milligrams, right? So you can see how small the microdose is compared to the macrodose. When you're dealing with the microdose, you're not going to be getting visuals. You're not going to be tripping. Really, more than anything, you're going to be feeling like you're having a better day. You might notice that you have more energy. You might notice that your thought patterns are more positive. It's really little subtle things. So the most important thing for your listeners to realize is that microdosing has no classic psychedelic effects. There's nothing sexy about it. It's a very small amount, very small doses, and it's really about a large transformation over a period of time. Whereas when you're taking a large dose of a psychedelic, you're having this amazing experience in a matter of 8 hours. So those are the major differences.
Yeah, and I've felt the microdose before, but in very subtle ways. So once again, not tripping, not hallucinating, anything like that. But I'll share from my personal experiences, the word that always comes to mind when people ask me, what did you feel or sense into? The word is, and it's interconnectivity. So I feel like all the parts of my brain is communicating with each other. So everything is connected. And that's just for me. But other things I've recognized as well is more mental clarity, right? Creativity. There's been things in my business and my work that have come from like a microdose, just insight. Also, like sometimes there's just this sense in the air of like, just like everything is cool. And those are some of the effects that I've personally felt. And I know you use the word interconnectivity. I just want to go here for a moment. Is there a benefit with psilocybin in neuroplasticity? Do you know?
Okay, so let's be clear that everything that I'm saying is a theory. It's hypothesized. I'm not a medical doctor. I haven't done double-blind clinical trials or anything like that. So ask me the question one more time. Sorry, Mike.
Is there any correlation between microdosing psilocybin in supporting neuroplasticity or regeneration, connection of the nerves in the brain?
Right. So I've heard Paul Stamets talk about the idea of neurogenesis and neuroplasticity being improved or generated while using not only psilocybin, but lion's mane. Now, I want to be clear. I'm pretty sure there's 0 studies with humans to prove this. Now, he's going off of studies with rats, where I believe they've given rats a dose of psilocybin next to a rat that hasn't gotten a dose of psilocybin. And then a few days later, they kill the rat. They examine the brain, and the brains of the rats that were given psilocybin had, 30% more growth, more neurogenesis happening. So I believe those trials or tests on rats were the basis for this theory that psilocybin creates neurogenesis, which is the growth of new neural pathways. It's also hypothesized that it improves neuroplasticity, or the ability for your brain to connect to different regions as well as heal itself. I've seen the same thing in my own personal experience with microdosing, as well with my clients, is I feel like it shuts off the default mode network, which is that area of your brain that's your ego. It's the critic. It's the person that's always critiquing you, thinking about the past, worrying about the future, saying, no, you can't do that. You're going to fail. So I feel like that person in me, and for a lot of my clients, gets quieted. He gets shut down. And when you're not hearing those same old stories and ruminations and patterns, you're going to be more creative. And if you're more creative, you're going to feel more energy. And if you're going to feel more energy, you're not going to be depressed. And if you're not going to be depressed, you're going to want to get out of bed in the morning, and you're going to want to be creative. So it's like microdosing is just really a springboard or like a little trampoline that gives you this extra boost to really get to these places that you were unable to get when the critic was shutting you down.
For sure. And I think it's really important you mentioned the default mode network, because that has everything to do with trauma, and bypassing that default mode network is what's really beneficial for most of us to get to get unstuck from those old patterns of rumination and thinking of the story of what happened to us and what our life's always going to be like. We're bypassing that and having a different look at things per se. So I don't have personal experience with that myself in relationship to the critic. I think I did a lot of deep personal work that was before I started to microdose, but I can see how that would lighten up a little bit as you just touch into more of what's here in the present moment and have more of that clarity and that connectivity, which is beautiful. And that's really what we're looking for. And you mentioned lion's mane, and that brings me to my next question for you here, Adam, is there different protocols for microdosing, or is it kind of a one size fits all model?
Great question. So one size does not fit all with microdosing or really psychedelics as a whole. So let's get that clear right now, that one size does not fit all for microdosing. So let's first talk about how many days a week that we microdose. Now, microdosing is not 7 days a week. On a very, very rare occasion, if we're maybe weaning somebody down off of heavy pharmaceuticals or something like that, maybe they'll take it 7 days a week. But we highly suggest that you get on a protocol where you're taking a few days off a week. And the reason is, first of all, psychedelics, even in small doses, have a 48-hour effect or an afterglow, meaning that you take it on a Monday and Tuesday, you're still going to get benefits from it. So the really great thing about microdosing is you still get benefits on your days off. So the most popular protocols right now for microdosing are the Fadiman protocol, which Dr. James Fadiman developed, and that is 1 day on, 2 days off. And the whole idea behind this protocol is it was a research protocol. And the idea was you take it on the first day, the second day you experience the afterglow, and then on the third day, you have your sober or your baseline day where you're going to journal and you're going to reflect potentially on the differences between microdose and non-microdose. Now, the second most popular protocol is the Stamets Protocol, and that's named after Paul Stamets. And his protocol is 5 days on, 2 days off, or 4 days on, 3 days off. And again, the idea behind these protocols, I believe, is, or at least the Stamets is, builds up in your system over 4 to 5 days, and then those 2 to 3 days off, you're still going to be getting benefits. Now, the other idea behind taking days off is we don't want to build the tolerance up. Tolerance definitely is something that can happen with psychedelics. If you're taking it every day, at the end of the month, it's not going to be as effective as it would be if you were taking your days off. Now, the third most popular protocol is the Microdosing Institute protocol. These guys are dear friends out of Holland, and they've had a lot of people who were doing the Fadiman protocol, and on that third day off where they hit a baseline, they would go back to their depression. So they wanted to come up with a protocol that allowed people to microdose on that third day. So the Microdose Institute protocol is day on, day off. And the last protocol that we see used is the intuitive protocol. And the idea behind the intuitive protocol is you take it when you need it, and you start to follow your own schedule, whereas you wake up in the morning and you make that decision on whether you're going to take it today. So the whole idea behind the intuitive protocol is that over time, after you've used these other protocols, you begin to get more in touch with your own intuition, and you come up with your own protocol that works best either for your day-to-day life, your work schedule, or how the flow of your week is going that particular week.
Great. So there's options for people to explore with, as well as listen to themselves intuitively, I hear, to find out which protocol or dosing works right for them.
Absolutely. And what I would suggest is that people try, one of these protocols for a month, and then maybe in their second month, they try a different protocol. Or maybe they do the Microdosing Institute protocol for 2 weeks, and then the next 2 weeks, they do the Stamets protocol. So again, one size doesn't fit all with microdosing. Not only do you have to try different protocols to see which one works best, you also have to try different dosages. And that's an important thing to cover with you as well, is not one specific microdose amount works for everyone. Certain people might have different sensitivities. People might have certain tolerances. So when starting to microdose, we really suggest that you start low and you go slow. So if you're working with a dried psilocybin, we suggest starting with maybe 25 to 50 milligrams. And that would be 0.025 on the scale or 0.05. So it's a very, very small amount. Once you've taken 25 to 50 milligrams and maybe you notice absolutely nothing, then maybe you turn it up to 75 milligrams. And then, add 100. But at some point, you're going to get to a point where you begin to feel more classic psychedelic effects. And at that point, we know that you want to lower your dose and you want to go back to that dose below it where you weren't having maybe those classic psychedelic effects. I also like to say that anxiety is a good indicator when you're learning how to microdose as to whether or not your dose is right or not. If your anxiety is heightened, I would bet that the dose is too high and you want to lower it. If your anxiety is lowered, then I would bet that you've probably found your sweet spot. And again, sweet spot is a term that we use in microdosing, meaning finding that proper subperceptual dose that lessens anxiety, increases energy, and doesn't have any of the classic psychedelic effects.
Great explanation. And you mentioned the word anxiety. So I particularly have dosed myself too high and felt that anxiety right off the rip. And I check in and say, okay, that's too much, and then back it down. So yes, Adam's very, very right. You may experience anxiety if your dose is too high. And speaking of anxiety, is anxiety and or depression one of the main reasons why people come to work with you and explore microdosing?
Absolutely. I would say depression is one of the top reasons. Anxiety is usually linked to depression. They're usually one and the same. You don't have one without the other. One of my first clients was my mother. And within an hour of her first dose at 72, I got a text that said, Adam, for the first time in my life, I don't feel crippling anxiety. And that was life-changing for me. That she was the first person to really let me know that her anxiety was removed. And again, she had a proper dose, right? And we found her sweet spot. And at 72, she can go about her normal day and see her friends and do her things and not have any classic psychedelic effects. And I think that's the real beauty and the power of these psychedelics in small doses, specifically psilocybin, which is what I'm working with, is that they really have the ability to help people lose the anxiety, lose the depression that they've carried for years. And let me be clear here. This is not a magic pill, right? It's not something that you just take one time and it removes all your problems. There's still work to be done. Although my mom had anxiety removed day one, there's still challenging days ahead. But again, what people notice is they just feel different. They're not thinking in the same thought patterns. If their kid spills the milk on the table, they're reacting to it differently. And I think the really healing part, and when we bypass the default mode network, is when we have the ability to look back on past traumas, memories, woundings with a different mindset. When we're thinking in new neural pathways, we tend to rewrite our story. And we can look at the past and the trauma and see it as a positive thing. That's led us to be a really, really strong individual, and why we sit here today talking about what we're talking about. So again, I feel really strongly in the ability to use psychedelics in small amounts to really help people with everything from depression to anxiety to addiction.
Yeah, and that reframing that you talk about as it relates to seeing our trauma or our situation from a new perspective is the healing. I mean, yes, I think these plants and funguses have some sort of component that affects the body or the biology, but also how we see. And when we can shift our perception to experience what happened to us or see ourselves in a new way or a life in a situation, that's where the healing is. So it's so beneficial, and thanks for pointing that out. Have you seen any benefits specifically with supporting people in microdosing that are suffering from addiction?
Yeah, addiction was actually some of the first few clients that came my way. And again, they were friends of dear friends, and people were reaching out to me in the 11th hour at 11:59. And the first addiction that I worked with was alcohol. And it was two men in general that were struggling with alcohol dependency. One of the men I had spoken to at 8:15 in the morning, and he already had 4 beers. Both of these individuals have children and lives and wives and careers. And at the stage that they came to me, they were facing losing their families, potentially going to jail and recovery, and really losing their job and everything they knew. So I was kind of the last ditch hope. And we began to see right away in day one that they were not experiencing withdrawals or cravings when they were counteracting it with microdosing. So it was really, really fascinating. Again, a lot of people, addiction is coming from trauma again, and they're saying that trauma in early childhood or life lends to an overactive default mode network, right? So if you're finally using a tool like psilocybin that's quieting your default mode network, you can finally react to the world a different way. You actually might even be able to look at that trauma differently that led you to drink. So again, through the course of 6 weeks with both of these individuals that were dealing with alcohol, I was giving them day-to-day support. They were taking other functional mushrooms to support them as well. They were exercising. We were looking at their diet. So there were a lot of factors that came into play, but alcohol was the first substance and addiction that we helped overcome. From there, we've worked with tobacco, chewing tobacco. I work with a lot of NHL guys. A lot of them chew tobacco for nervousness and anxiety before the game. We were able to cut that out of a lot of players' regimens. Percocets, opiates, pills, pain pills, we've helped a few clients with. And then probably the substance that we've helped people the most to get off of safely and effectively are antidepressants and SSRIs. And again, this it can be looked at as a very, very dangerous area. Not a lot of people like to mix or mess with it. So again, this is not something that's recommended to most people, but I must say that microdosingpsychedelics.com is a website that Dr. Fadiman has put together that talks a lot about contraindications and SSRIs and medicines that might contraindicate with microdosing. And the good news is we don't have a lot of reports of too many people having contraindications. Right now, it's lithium, a few others. People are always going to want to talk to a doctor or an expert before they're mixing any kind of medication with SSRIs. But microdosingpsychedelics.com is a great website for people to check out medications. But again, I really think that microdosing is going to be a tool in the future to safely and effectively help people wean off of other pharmaceuticals.
For sure. And I believe there's companies doing a lot of research right now in regards to using psychedelic compounds in a therapeutic way, just besides like MAPS. I know I've heard of them. I can't pull them off the top of my head right now, but this is the new wave of coming through. And it's almost like, this new wave, but we're going back to like ancient roots too, like I said before, of working with the plants and fungus. And you opened this up with finding a fossil, I don't know how many millions of years ago, but fungus has been around before us, and it's really intelligent. And it's really connecting us. There are certain molecules in there that work directly with our serotonin systems and other systems to unlock these things that's in our biology. So we're made to coexist with them, I believe. And I know you may have a little bit more to say on this, but I know animals in the wild eat psilocybin mushrooms to have alternate states of consciousness. So, and we're animals too. So we're back in nature, we're exploring, and it's really beautiful. You mentioned the word other functional mushrooms, and what I hear from that is maybe other medicinal mushrooms that you can use in conjunction with microdosing, like lion's mane. Can you speak about that for a moment, Adam?
Yeah, absolutely. Paul Stamets was the first person to suggest the idea of stacking other functional mushrooms with psilocybin. So the Paul Stamets stack is probably the most popular stack, and that is lion's mane stacked with psilocybin, stacked with niacin. Now, his idea behind that, again, is, I believe, from the rat studies where it creates neurogenesis, improves neuroplasticity. So the niacin in Paul's stack is to kind of help flush everything out to the tips of your fingers and the tips of your toes, make it more bioavailable to you. So he believes that the niacin kind of makes everything else kick in and more active for you. My company, Flow State, has a stack as well. It's lion's mane, chaga, cordyceps, and maitake mushrooms. The lion's mane, again, we believe is great for the brain. Chaga is the king of all mushrooms, over 215 phytonutrients. So that's amazing for energy, stress. Maitake, again, for immunity. And cordyceps is a great mushroom for sustained energy throughout the day, as well as anti-stress. So again, we really believe strongly in this blend of multiple mushrooms with the psilocybin. Again, there is a fungal intelligence to these mushrooms. They are adaptogenic. So whatever each individual needs, the mushrooms get in their system, they use their intelligence, and they adapt to the deficiencies that these people need, which is why it's amazing that, the same dosage or blend of a microdose can help somebody with diabetes and Alzheimer's and eczema, dementia, all across the board. It's treating all kinds of different conditions with the same dosages and blends. So again, I really think that comes down to the intelligence of these mushrooms. We are mushrooms. We came from mushrooms. I mean, the oldest cave paintings, 10,000 years old, are of mushrooms, mushroom ceremonies. There's another cave painting in Algeria, I believe is 6,000 years old, and it's a bee mushroom-headed shaman where there's mushrooms growing all over the shaman's arm and body. So again, there is a reason that royalty and the powers that be don't want us eating these mushrooms. They lead to consciousness and not being held down. The Egyptians did not allow the common men to eat mushrooms, although the pharaohs could. So again, there is a real intelligence to these mushrooms. And I think that's why they're so beneficial to somebody, whether they're dealing with alcohol addiction or opiate addiction, or again, maybe traumatic brain injury and chronic pain. And that's the really great thing about traumatic brain injury is we don't have treatments for people who've destroyed their brain. And we're finding in these rat studies that lion's mane and psilocybin are potentially creating neurogenesis or new neural pathways. So we could be using microdosing or large doses of psilocybin to repair, reopen, and reawake people's brains that have been damaged.
It's such amazing research. I'm super fascinated from my own personal experience, the word, like I say, is that interconnectivity. So I know something's happening when I take these substances, and I've seen amazing results in people's lives. So maybe you can share a little bit about a case study, maybe that comes to mind besides the alcoholism gentleman that speaks to you, that you can just share with us in regards to the power of microdosing.
Yeah, let's talk about the traumatic brain injury. I was working with a former pro hockey player that had a traumatic brain injury after being knocked out in a fight. Not only did he have the trauma of the punch, but he had the trauma of, again, his head hitting the ground. He had to learn to walk and talk again. He had to learn to speak. But most importantly, he suffered from awful migraines to some extent where, he had to be in dark rooms for entire days. It was absolutely awful. When I began working with him, he was having trouble linking his speech together, putting sentences together, cognitive functioning. And within the first day and the first dose, I began to get text messages from friends who he had phone calls with, and they were blown away at his ability to speak, his ability to put sentences and words together. And the most amazing thing about this is over time, a matter of a month, I believe he only microdosed for 2 or 3 months and is now going about his life like a normal individual. Ended up getting engaged, is set to be married, and a new job, all from being somebody that had to be in a dark room all the time from migraines and crazy head pain from this traumatic brain injury. Now, it didn't completely take away the migraines. He still suffers from migraines now and again, but it took away the intensity, the severity, and the frequency of them happening from maybe, multiple a day to 1 or 2 a week. So again, I think there's really magical things going on in the brain. I am not a brain doctor. I'm not a specialist. This is all a theory. Again, we don't have human studies where we're looking at the brain post-mortem to see what's working. So it's not proven, but again, this is what we're hypothesizing.
Beautiful story. I mean, that's life-changing, just from a substance that is helping him improve his life. And I see a world-renowned functional neurologist, because when I got sick and had irritable bowel disease, the brain and gut are so intricately connected that my brain was inflamed. I was suffering from cognitive issues, and almost to the point where it was like Alzheimer's. And I was 30 years old, and it was super, super scary. And I didn't know what to do, but I began taking medicinal mushrooms first, like chaga, to help the immunoregulator, right? I think the Chinese used to call it the diamond of the forest. Yep. It's an amazing mushroom. And where I'm going with this is I still see a functional neurologist today. And my functional neurologist, the first time I saw him, I went in there, and I won't drop his name today, but I just said, hey, doc, I've been through everything. I've done, so many different things to get well, and including psychedelic therapies and all this. And he said, oh, great, sit down. Let me share with you my psychedelic journeys.
Nice.
So this research is getting out there, and he speaks to people around the world. And this particular gentleman is a world-renowned functional neurologist who actually explores with psychedelics himself. And if he comes on the show, he'll disclose that. But yes, this is real stuff, and it's really important that people take what makes sense to them and take it slow. Do your research. Right, check up on Dr. James Fadiman, Paul Stamets. These are PhDs in really accredited people. Stamets is like the mushroom man. I mean, the stuff he's come up with from mushrooms to saving the bee population. If you want to watch a really cool documentary, I'm sure you've seen it 10 times over. Fantastic fungi. It's amazing. The mycelium is underneath the ground, and the trees are communicating in it. And it's mushrooms are like running this world.
Yeah, well, mushrooms are running this world. Definitely check out Fantastic Fungi. Check out How to Change Your Mind by Michael Pollan. That goes deeply into all the research they did in the 50s and all that they've already proven about the validity of LSD for things like alcoholism and all that kind of good stuff. You brought up something really important too, which is the gut. And there are just as many, if not more, pathways in the gut than there is in the brain. So again, here I am telling you that everything's happening in the brain, but I think, just like you said, just as much is probably happening in the gut. And again, hopefully we're going to find more out about that in upcoming research. I think that is as well why I've got chaga and these other immunity support type of mushrooms in the blend, is because I do think the gut plays such a big part in health and happiness. And hopefully science is going to be looking into that more with all our new technologies.
Yes, for sure. And I just had Christina Mitz, who works with Dr. Bill Code. He got multiple sclerosis and healed himself through a fecal microbial transplant. I healed irritable bowel disease through a fecal microbial transplant. So I know the power of bacteria and the power of poop. And it's amazing. And also I want to say too, for people who are in recovery, what Adam and I are talking about, if your consciousness isn't ready to digest the fact that these are medicines, then that's okay, right? You give yourself permission to just let these words land softly on your ears, but really recognize too, maybe you come from a background of Alcoholics Anonymous, and the founder, Bill Wilson, was very much connected with these big psychonauts back in the day and exploring with LSD. And in fact, he wanted to integrate LSD into the Alcoholics Anonymous program, but the organization above, weren't really in support of that. So he kind of left and did his own thing using LSD to support his consciousness and healing. So there's so many parts to this psychedelic, exploration and journey that we're all kind of navigating both collectively and individually. I know I used psychedelics back in the day when I was suffering, 14 years old. I went on a hell of a trip with LSD. It was terrible. It wasn't a good time. And then, visiting psychedelics again years later in my recovery, but using it in a different context, not to escape myself, but to actually check in, tune in. My first journey was with ayahuasca, and then I journeyed with psilocybin and MDMA assisted psychotherapy. So, and I've gotten, exponential results from these therapies. So it's pretty amazing. And the work you're doing is amazing too, Adam. And just for the listeners, why don't you share with how you're supporting people in this field as a psychedelic coach and guide?
So I work with people pre and post integration, meaning we start by talking about the experience. We educate on microdosing. We look into creating unique protocols and dosages for that person. We work with them prior to starting on what are your intentions? What are you looking to get out of this? That type of stuff. And then from there, I'm checking in with them on day one. We make sure that their dose is right. We make sure that they're hitting that sweet spot, that it is psychedelic or that it is not psychedelic, and then they're in their microdose range. And then throughout the course of week one, we're checking in. I'm working with them if they need to process anything. Again, psychedelics, even in small doses, are non-specific amplifiers. So you might get access to memories you haven't thought about in years. You might think about things that you haven't thought about. You might even recover things that you've buried and totally forgotten. So again, it's important on this journey to have somebody that can support you, help you unpack those type of things. And then throughout the first week and then the first month, we're just checking in multiple times a week. They're journaling. Journaling is really important to track your changes. Usually we want you to journal at the end of the day to really go about your day and write about what happened and what you experienced. Microdosing is about subtle changes day to day. It's not like a large dose, mind-blowing journey. So the journal is important to really catch the little things that you're getting through. And then after the month, we believe a month is the minimum you should really take to microdose before you decide if it's positive or negative. We go over the whole experience and we decide if you want to keep on with the experience or if you're going to stop. And from there, I continue to support my clients throughout the rest of their life, really.
Wow. Well, that's amazing work. And thank you for taking that on. And thank you for being courageous enough to, really step into this arena where, hey, things aren't exactly legalized yet, but knowing the power and benefits of them. And once again, we're not here to supply anyone with psychedelics. It's not really difficult to find fungus either if you really want it. But thank you for the work you're doing. And Adam, where can people learn more about you, your services, websites, social media, things of that nature?
Yeah, you can find me at Flow State Micro on Instagram. You can shoot me an email at adam@flowstatemicro.com. We can hop on a call, talk about how microdosing could potentially benefit you. Again, I don't provide any illegal substances. This is simply coaching and education and then support through the integration of the entire process. But yeah, shoot me an email. Follow us on Instagram. We got a lot of great things coming up in the pipeline. We've got a 6-week course that you can check out at San Francisco Psychedelic Society /microdosing movement. It's only $60 and you get 6 2.5-hour classes, as well as access to the microdosing support network. Twice a month, I run a free microdosing support network through the San Francisco Psychedelic Society where anybody can show up. They don't have to have microdosed at all, but it's about answering questions, connecting you to community, and then allowing you to share your story. Whether it be positive or negative. What we're just trying to do is open a free support network and create a community around microdosing.
Amazing. And we'll put those links in the show notes so people have access to that. And Adam, thank you so much, brother, for showing up today and giving this beautiful knowledge to the listeners.
Thank you, Mike. And I want to remind, lastly, all of your people in recovery that mushrooms and these substances were just made illegal in 1972 by Nixon, who needed a reason to arrest people of color and the counterculture movement. So again, if we can really myth bust here and break down the fact that these are natural substances that come from the earth, I really think they can lead to a lot of healing for people that are struggling with addiction.
For sure, 100%. And I think they grow on every continent besides Antarctica, if I'm not mistaken. So the Mother Earth wants them to be here, and they're for our health and healing.
Thank you, Mike. They're great tools. And remember, you are the medicine. They are the tools. You are the medicine.
You are the medicine. Thank you so much, Adam.
Thanks, Mike. Have a great day, brother.
Bye-bye. I want to thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. Adam is an amazing resource on this topic, and I am so grateful for all the lives he is touching with his work. If you liked today's episode, please remember to subscribe to the show and leave a comment. It's greatly appreciated as it helps with others to hear about the show and have access to this information. Please feel free to check out the show notes to learn more about Adam, his offerings, and how to contact him. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not medical advice. If you think you have a medical problem or condition, consult a qualified medical professional. Once again, thank you for listening, and remember, you can heal no matter what your story may be.